What would you do if someone you trusted tried to steal your entire life's work right from under your nose? Today I'm sharing the most shocking family betrayal story you'll ever hear and how my brilliant mother turned the tables on a manipulative stepfather who thought he had already won. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever dealt with someone who wasn't who they seemed to be. Hit that like button because this story has more plot twists than any thriller you've ever watched. I'm Vanessa, and this is about my mother Margaret Taylor, a woman who was truly extraordinary. Growing up in the 1990s, it was just mom and me against the world. But my mother wasn't ordinary. She was a computer engineer who started coding when seeing a woman in tech was like spotting a unicorn. Picture this, a brilliant woman sitting in boardrooms packed with men who would mansplain her own code back to her and constantly question her expertise. But my mom, she never backed down. She had this fierce determination that would later save both our lives from a nightmare we never saw coming. When I was 10, mom made the biggest gamble of her life. She walked away from her secure, six-figure job and decided to start her own company from our garage. I remember helping her set up servers, not understanding what any of it did, but seeing her eyes light up when she explained how her technology would change everything. Those early years were brutal. We survived on ramen noodles and determination. But mom never once made me feel like we were struggling. She worked 18-hour days but always made time for our Friday night tradition, ice cream and terrible movies, just the two of us. By the time I turned 16, SafeStream had exploded. Major corporations were paying millions for her cybersecurity protocols. We moved to a beautiful house, and I was so proud of what she'd built through pure genius and grit. That's when Lawrence Walker slithered into our lives and everything changed. Mom met Lawrence at a charity gala. He was 45, 8 years older, and worked as an investment advisor. This guy used charm black Mercedes, $1,000 suits, and he seemed genuinely fascinated by mom's work. At first, I was happy for her. After years of sacrificing everything for her company and me, she deserved someone amazing. Lawrence took her to exclusive restaurants, bought thoughtful gifts, and actually listened when she talked about technology. He even tried connecting with me, bringing books about powerful women and asking about my college plans. On paper, he was perfect, but something felt wrong. There was this coldness that flashed in his eyes when he thought nobody was looking. When he came over, I'd catch him studying our house like he was appraising everything. He wasn't admiring our home, he was calculating its value. When I mentioned this to family, they brushed me off. He's just appreciating your mother's success, they said. You're being overprotective. Maybe I was, but that instinct was about to save us both. 6 months later, Lawrence proposed during a romantic Napa Valley weekend. When mom called me, absolutely glowing, I tried to match her excitement, but dread was building in my stomach. Isn't this moving fast? I asked carefully. When you know, she replied. Besides, I'm not getting any younger. The wedding was everything Lawrence wanted: lavish, expensive, packed with over 200 guests who were mostly his business contacts that mom had never met. I stood beside her as maid of honor, forcing down my concerns and focusing on her happiness. But after the honeymoon, the changes started immediately. Lawrence began suggesting mom reduce her hours at SafeStream. You've built an empire, Margaret, he'd say. Time to enjoy life. That's what your executive team is for. This was terrifying because mom lived and breathed her company. But gradually, she started coming home earlier, delegating decisions she'd never trusted to anyone else. Meanwhile, Lawrence was diving deep into their finances, convincing her to merge accounts and restructure her investments. When I questioned this, mom defended him. Lawrence is a professional, Vanessa. This is literally his job. When I left for college, I felt like I was abandoning her. But mom insisted I focus on my education. This is your time, she said. I have Lawrence now. My phone calls home revealed disturbing changes. Mom was traveling constantly with Lawrence, attending social events that weren't her style, and renovating our warm family home into a cold showpiece with modern furniture mom would never choose. When I came home for summer break, Lawrence had hired full-staff housekeeper, chef, gardener. Mom seemed pleased but uncomfortable. It's an adjustment, she admitted when we were alone. But Lawrence says I've earned this. Over the next few years, Lawrence's control became obvious. He'd speak for her at family gatherings, interrupt her stories, and correct her memories. Our sacred Friday movie nights were constantly canceled for Lawrence's social obligations. Mom's calls became rare, and when we did talk, Lawrence was always hovering, commenting, or just taking the phone to chat about their latest expensive purchase. The independent woman who raised me was disappearing, replaced by someone who deferred to her husband's judgment about everything. Then came the call that shattered everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was debugging code when Mom's number appeared. The moment I heard her voice, I knew something was catastrophically wrong. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months to a year. Don't worry about me, she said, her voice steady despite the devastating news. I've started treatment, and Lawrence is taking wonderful care of me. I drove straight to their house, my mind racing. But when I arrived, Lawrence blocked the entrance with a grave expression. She's resting, he said, physically preventing me from entering. The medication makes her drowsy. You should have called first. She's my mother, I said, fighting to keep my voice controlled. He reluctantly let me in but hovered during my entire visit. This became the new pattern: Lawrence as the gatekeeper to my mother's life, making it clear I was now an outsider. Over the following weeks, I desperately tried to help with Mom's care. I researched her cancer type, joined support groups, compiled information about clinical trials. Lawrence dismissed everything. We have the best oncologists in the country, he'd say. We don't need amateur medical advice. Mom seemed torn between us, too weak to handle the growing tension. When I suggested a care schedule, Lawrence claimed it would disrupt her routine and cause unnecessary stress. I found ways to visit anyway, arriving when Lawrence was at the gym or his office. During these precious moments, Mom and I reconnected. We talked about my work, her company, and happy memories. During one visit, she said something that seemed strange at the time. I want you to know you'll be taken care of, Vanessa. No matter what happens. Mom, please don't talk like that, I said, tears forming. You're going to beat this. She squeezed my hand. Hope for the best. Plan for the worst. That's how I built SafeStream, remember? Then she said something odd. I've been meeting with Harold Bennett. You remember him? My law school friend who helped start the company. I nodded, remembering the kind elderly attorney who'd been present at every company milestone. Trust Harold, she whispered, no matter what Lawrence says. As Mom deteriorated, Lawrence's control became absolute. He hired private nurses who reported only to him, controlled all medical appointments, and severely restricted visitors. Even my aunt could only visit Sundays between 2 and 4 p.m. I noticed Lawrence referring to Mom's company as our company. He was attending board meetings as her proxy, making decisions about SafeStream's future without consulting the executive team Mom had carefully built. During one rare visit, I found an unfamiliar man leaving Mom's bedroom with a briefcase. When I asked the nurse who he was, she said vaguely, one of Mr. Walker's associates. They had papers for Mrs. Walker to sign. Mom looked exhausted and troubled. What did Lawrence want you to sign? I asked gently. She shook her head. Company matters. Lawrence says it's important to prepare for the transition. What transition, Mom? You're still the CEO. Tears filled her eyes. I'm so tired, Vanessa. Sometimes it's easier to sign than argue. In Mom's final weeks, Lawrence made visiting nearly impossible. He claimed doctor's orders required complete rest and limited my visits to 15 minutes twice weekly. He was always present, watching and listening. Mom passed away on a quiet Sunday morning in April. Lawrence was supposedly by her side. I wasn't called until hours later. Your mother went peacefully, Lawrence told me, his voice formal and cold. The funeral is Thursday. My assistant will send details. I hung up and collapsed, mourning not just Mom's death, but all the final moments Lawrence had stolen from me. The funeral was exactly what Lawrence wanted: extravagant, formal, and impersonal. The church overflowed with massive flowers and hundreds of people I'd never seen. Lawrence delivered a eulogy focusing on Mom's business success and their perfect partnership rather than the amazing woman she was. Margaret and I shared a vision, he said, dabbing dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. We built a life of significance together. I wanted to scream that he'd only known her for years, that he knew nothing about the woman who stayed up all night helping with science projects, who laughed until she cried at terrible movies, who taught herself programming from library books when she couldn't afford classes. The reception felt like a networking event. Lawrence moved through the crowd accepting condolences with practiced grace, occasionally gesturing toward me with a pitying look. Vanessa is taking it rather hard. I heard him tell expensive suited men. Margaret always worried about her emotional fragility. This was the first of many lies Lawrence would tell to rewrite our family story. As guests left, I approached Lawrence about collecting Mom's personal items, her journals, photo albums, favorite books. Now's not the time, he said dismissively. The house is full of people. We'll sort through Margaret's things properly later. But later never came. Lawrence ignored my calls and texts. When I drove to the house, security informed me I wasn't on the approved visitor list. There must be a mistake, I said, stunned. I'm Margaret Walker's daughter. I have my instructions, miss. The guard replied uncomfortably. You need to contact Mr. Walker directly. When I finally reached Lawrence after days of persistent calling, he was coldly dismissive. That won't be possible right now. The will is in probate, and nothing can be distributed until that process completes. Over the following weeks, disturbing reports reached me. Mom's assistant called saying Lawrence had cleared out her entire office. My cousin spotted him at a luxury car dealership. A family friend saw him dining with a younger woman at an exclusive restaurant. Mom had been gone less than a month, and Lawrence was already living like a wealthy bachelor. The most alarming call came from Mom's college roommate. I hate to tell you this, she said, but Lawrence was telling people at the country club that you've been completely cut out of the will. He was very explicit, saying Margaret changed her mind about you because of some falling out. This was complete fiction. Despite Lawrence's interference, Mom and I had remained close. There had been no falling out. But Lawrence was clearly spreading lies to make it seem reasonable that Mom would disinherit her only child. When I finally connected with Harold Bennett, Mom's longtime attorney, he was outraged. This is nonsense, he assured me. I've been Margaret's attorney for 20 years. She would never cut you out. Lawrence claims the will is in probate. I told him. Harold's pause was telling. Interesting. Because I haven't filed anything yet. The reading is scheduled for next week. So, what's happening with Mom's estate right now? That's what concerns me, Harold replied. I'll look into this immediately. I arrived at Harold's office 15 minutes early for the reading. The reception area was packed with family, SafeStream executives, and Mom's oldest friends. Lawrence arrived last, flanked by two suited men he introduced as his financial advisors. He barely acknowledged me, taking a seat across the room with a smug smile that made my stomach churn. Harold's office radiated old-world professionalism with dark wood paneling and leather-bound law books. As we settled into the conference room, I felt like I was in a movie. Family gathered anxiously while the attorney prepared to reveal secrets from beyond the grave. Harold began formally, starting with smaller bequests, money to her university, books to the library, specific items to family members. Each bequest included a personal note explaining its significance. As the reading continued, Lawrence became increasingly agitated, checking his watch and shifting restlessly. Finally, Lawrence's patience exploded. This is all very touching, he interrupted, but perhaps we could skip to the main assets, the house, investments, SafeStream. That's what we're all here for, isn't it? Harold remained calm. The will is structured as Margaret wished. Lawrence will reach the remaining assets shortly. Lawrence leaned back with exaggerated annoyance. Fine, continue with the trinkets. When Harold finally reached SafeStream, Lawrence suddenly stood, his face flushed with rage. Why are we pretending? He shouted. Everyone knows Margaret changed her will during her final months. He pointed directly at me. She gets nothing. I made sure of it. The room went dead silent. Even his associates looked shocked by his outburst. Then Harold did something unexpected. He laughed, not loudly, just a short, incredulous chuckle, but in the tense silence, it echoed off the walls. Mr. Walker, Harold said calmly, I'm not sure what document you're referring to, but this is Margaret's valid last will and testament, signed and witnessed 6 months before her illness. Lawrence's face reddened further. That's impossible. I have a newer will signed 2 months ago. My attorneys handled it. Those would be the gentlemen who aren't here today. Harold asked pointedly. Lawrence turned to his associates. Tell him about the revised will. The older man shifted uncomfortably. Lawrence, we should discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss, Lawrence insisted. Margaret signed a new will. I watched her do it. Harold cleared his throat. Sir, even if such a document exists, which I highly doubt, it wouldn't affect the majority of Margaret's assets anyway. Lawrence stared at him. What are you talking about? I'm her husband. Everything passes to me. Under normal circumstances, you would have a strong claim, Harold acknowledged. However, you can't change a trust that transferred assets last year. Lawrence's face went white. What trust? Harold opened another folder. The Margaret Taylor Living Trust, established 14 months ago, which transferred the majority of her assets, including her controlling interest in SafeStream and approximately $15 million in securities and cash to her beneficiaries. The room erupted in murmurs. Lawrence looked like he might collapse. That's impossible, he whispered. I would have known. The trust was created before your marriage, Harold explained. Margaret was quite deliberate about timing. As her separate property brought into the marriage, she had every legal right to establish it without your knowledge or consent. The timing suddenly clicked. 14 months ago, Mom had made that unexpected trip to visit me, claiming she needed a girls' weekend. We'd spent 3 days together, and she'd seemed unusually reflective, asking about my long-term goals and what I thought about her legacy. She must have been preparing the trust arrangements. Who? Lawrence demanded, his voice breaking. Who are the beneficiaries? Harold looked directly at me. Vanessa Taylor is the primary beneficiary, with secondary distributions to Margaret's charitable foundation for women in technology. This can't be legal, Lawrence sputtered. Margaret was my wife. I had a right to know about major financial decisions. Harold remained impassive. California is a community property state, yes, but separate property acquired before marriage remains separate unless explicitly combined. Margaret was very careful to maintain the distinction. Harold explained that the trust was irrevocable, meaning once assets were placed in it, they couldn't be removed or changed, even by Mom herself. The trust held Mom's 70% ownership stake in SafeStream, the family home and contents, her investment portfolio, and various other properties. If the house is in the trust, I asked, finding my voice, why has Lawrence been living there and controlling access? Excellent question, Harold nodded. The trust grants Lawrence a life estate in the residence for 90 days following Margaret's death, after which the property reverts fully to the trust beneficiaries. Those 90 days expire next month. Lawrence's associates were whispering urgently, but he seemed beyond hearing them. What exactly does Mr. Walker receive from the estate? One associate finally asked. Harold consulted his papers. As Margaret's spouse, Mr. Walker receives her half of the community property acquired during marriage. This includes their Lake Tahoe vacation home, joint bank accounts totaling approximately $800,000, and vehicles titled in both names. That's it. Lawrence looked up, incredulous. After 4 years of marriage? Given that your marriage lasted only 4 years and considering the significant assets Margaret brought into the marriage, this distribution is quite generous under California law, Harold replied evenly. The trust also provides a one-time payment of $500,000 to you, Lawrence, which Margaret described as appreciation for the companionship during our time together. Someone in the room whistled low. Mom's parting gift too. Lawrence was both generous and a subtle acknowledgement that their relationship had been more transactional than loving. This is fraud, Lawrence finally said, his voice ice cold. Margaret never discussed this trust with me. She hid assets from her husband. No court will let this stand. Harold seemed prepared for this response. I assure you, everything was done with meticulous legal care. Margaret understood exactly what she was doing and why. He looked pointedly at Lawrence. She was concerned about certain behaviors she had observed, particularly regarding financial control. As Lawrence stood to leave with his associates, Harold delivered the final blow. One more thing, Mr. Walker. The trust includes a litigation deterrent clause. Any challenge to the trust by a named beneficiary results in that person's complete disinheritance. While you're consulting with your attorneys, you might want to consider whether risking your $800,000 in Lake Tahoe property is worth pursuing a battle you're unlikely to win. Lawrence froze at the door, his back rigid. Without another word, he walked out. After Lawrence left, Harold revealed the full scope of Mom's planning. She had been meeting with him regularly during her illness, not to change her will as Lawrence believed, but to finalize how the trust would operate after her death. She left you letters, Harold said, sliding a sealed envelope across the table. This is the first one. There are others to be given according to her instructions. Harold then revealed that Mom had been quietly building a case against Lawrence. She had kept detailed journals documenting his financial control tactics, his isolation strategies, and had even recorded conversations where he made concerning statements about her money. Your mother was playing chess while Lawrence thought they were playing checkers, Harold said with admiration. She had installed a security system Lawrence didn't know about, with cameras in her home office. We have footage of him going through her files during her chemotherapy appointments. Most damning of all, Mom had hired a private investigator 3 months before establishing the trust. The investigator uncovered Lawrence's previous pattern of targeting wealthy women, marrying them, and leaving with substantial settlements. Lawrence's reaction was swift and vicious. His attorneys filed motions challenging the trust's validity, claiming Mom had been unduly influenced and that Lawrence had been fraudulently kept in the dark about marital assets. But Harold was prepared. Mom had documented everything meticulously, including Lawrence's concerning behaviors and his pattern of financial manipulation. The evidence was overwhelming. Margaret was preparing for divorce before her diagnosis, Harold explained. When she became ill, she shifted to protecting her assets through the trust instead. As Lawrence's legal challenges proceeded, I faced the immediate problem of recovering Mom's personal belongings. Harold arranged for us to enter the property with a locksmith and sheriff's deputy, armed with trust documents establishing my rights. When we arrived at the house, Lawrence was there, and his appearance was shocking. The polished, sophisticated man who had charmed my mother was gone, replaced by someone disheveled and hostile. The confrontation escalated when we discovered Lawrence had been systematically stealing items from the house, including my grandmother's wedding ring, which was specifically listed in the trust inventory. When I found the ring in his nightstand, he lunged at me, trying to grab it back. "You're just like your mother," he spat as the deputy restrained him, "thinking you're so smart, so superior. She was nothing before me, nothing. I earned that money listening to her boring stories, pretending to care about her stupid company, enduring her clingy daughter. I deserved everything she had." His mask had completely slipped, revealing the true person beneath the charming facade. Each word confirmed what I had suspected all along. Lawrence had never loved Mom. She had been nothing more than a financial target. Lawrence's challenge to the trust crumbled as evidence of his behavior mounted. His own words during the confrontation, witnessed by law enforcement, became part of the court record. The judge not only dismissed Lawrence's claims but issued a restraining order preventing him from entering any trust property. We discovered hidden documents in Lawrence's office revealing his careful planning, spreadsheets detailing Mom's assets before they'd even met, notes outlining his strategy for isolating her from family and friends, and even a timeline for taking control of SafeStream. Mom had discovered his true nature and quietly outmaneuvered him, protecting both her legacy and me with the same strategic brilliance that had built her company. With Lawrence permanently removed by court order, I began reclaiming not just Mom's physical legacy, but her emotional one. I restored the family home to reflect her warm personality, undoing his cold renovations and filling it again with love and memories. I used a significant portion of the trust to establish the Margaret Taylor Foundation for Women in Technology, providing scholarships and mentorship to girls interested in computer science. The foundation reflects Mom's values: education, opportunity, and fostering independence. SafeStream continues thriving under the leadership team Mom had assembled. I took a board seat but maintained my own career, honoring Mom's belief that I should build my own path rather than simply inherit hers. Over the months, I discovered more about Mom's final year through the letters she had left with Harold. Each addressed different aspects of life. She wanted to share wisdom about career, relationships, finances, finding purpose. One letter particularly moved me. "By now you know about Lawrence and the trust. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive, but I needed to protect you from his manipulation. Creating the trust wasn't just about keeping money from him, it was about ensuring that what I built would continue creating good in the world through you." Her final letter, delivered on the 1-year anniversary of her passing, contained these words: "Trust yourself as I trusted you. Your instincts about Lawrence were right from the beginning, and that same intuition will guide you well throughout your life." In the end, Lawrence failed completely. He tried to separate us, to rewrite our family narrative, to steal not just Mom's wealth but her very legacy. Instead, he ultimately strengthened the bonds he sought to break and taught us valuable lessons about trust, protection, and the power of careful planning. Harold shared one final safeguard mom had created. She had anonymously funded a database of Lawrence's methods to be shared with women's advocacy groups, ensuring he couldn't do to anyone else what he tried to do to her, even facing her own mortality. Mom was thinking about protecting others. It was the ultimate expression of the strength and foresight that had defined her life. The experience changed me, making me both more cautious and more determined to live authentically. I carry forward not just Mom's financial legacy, but her values: independence, strategic thinking, generosity, and the courage to protect what matters most. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to deal with someone who wasn't who they pretended to be? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, sometimes the quietest warriors win the most important battles. Thank you for listening to this journey of justice, love, and the power of a mother's protection that transcended even death itself.